Everybody, I'm Dr. Weber, and today we're going to talk about the movement bucket approach, okay, and also the strength, power, and conditioning buckets. These four buckets are going to be the components of training that hit all of your fitness components like balance, agility, coordination, strength, muscular strength, power, speed, those types of words. We're going to talk about each bucket and what the bucket entails and how to effectively coordinate these buckets throughout your PE class or unified inclusive lesson. So what you want to think about first is we're going to have a movement bucket. So this bucket, the movement bucket, is going to be things like flexibility, mobility. This is going to be activation or stability exercises. And then we'll also have a dynamic warm-up. Dynamic warm-up will include things like bear crawls, locomotor skills, like jumping and hopping and stuff like that. Pre-power exercises in the movement bucket. So the movement bucket is going to prepare the body for movement and higher intensities. So higher threshold training like power training, sprinting, stuff of that nature. So for example, if you're going to have a tag game, you might want to do it after the movement bucket, after the warm-up. If you're going to play or if you're going to time students for their sprints, 10-yard or 40-yard sprints, then you're going to want to do it after the movement bucket. Okay, so after the movement bucket, you have the power bucket. The power bucket is going to be things like sprints, jumps, throws, and that sort of nature. And you have your lower implement power, and then you have your heavier implement power. So you have like a lower load power, such as plyometric jumping, throwing a med ball, and sprinting, and then you have heavy loads like cleans, snatch, okay, or split jerks and Olympic movements. All right, so that would be in your power bucket. In your strength bucket, you're going to have things like push, pull, squat, hinge, and these are going to be the movement patterns and also core exercises in your strength bucket. So after you perform your movement and got yourself warmed up with flexibility and range of motion, also balance and stability and activation, and a thorough dynamic warm-up like locomotor skills and dynamic stretching. After that, you get into your power, so you can get then into your sprints, jumps, throws, your heavy and your lower implement loading, and then you're going to have strength bucket where you're hitting push, pull, squat, hinge, and core exercises. So after you've done your power exercises, then you go into your strength. If you're in a PE class, that strength can look like push-ups, it can look like partner pulls, or pulling someone up from the ground for a pulling effect, or taking a rope or a shirt or a towel and then rowing it back and forth, or banded rows, cable rows if you have the equipment. But we're thinking about low equipment needs here. So pull-ups, if you have a pull-up bar, obviously, but those can tend to be harder for most individuals. You want to be able to build up the pull-ups, so maybe horizontal rowing, or some supported pull-ups with some bands if you understand how to do that. So the last bucket is going to be the conditioning bucket. The conditioning bucket is going to have in your cardiovascular activities, such as high-intensity interval training, long, slow duration training, and then middle distance training, okay? Middle distance training. So basically, medium intensity, medium distance, then you have high intensity, low distance, and then you have long distance and low intensity. So those will be the three different types of conditioning you can do for your athletes. That can be the actual game of the sport. So the sport, technically, you'll be moving for more than 3 minutes. So that would be considered aerobic training. There's also going to be some sprinting in there and walking. That's also going to be considered aerobic training or conditioning. And then there's going to be plays where you're at a medium intensity. So that's also going to be aerobic training. So something like sports in general, playing the game itself is going to be conditioning. So that'd be something that you might want to do at the last part of the class. So if you're going to do something like strength, you could do bear crawls, okay? You could do squats, split squats. You could perform body weight lunges, body weight deadlifts, so single leg, one leg deadlifts or reaches. You could also do lateral squats, things in the lateral plane. For power, you can think about jumping laterally and linearly, vertical and horizontal. You can think about hopping and jumping, so jumping on 2 feet and then hopping on one leg, medial, moving in and then moving laterally, forward and backward, in all different multi-directions for power. Also, we can throw rotationally overhead. We can also slam it down at the ground, overhead slam as well. And we can throw it at the wall, and we can pass it at the wall, okay? Those are some power exercises that would be lighter implement loading. So if it was something like a snatch or a deadlift or a power exercise, that would be requiring lots of heavy load, okay? That might be something, if you're gonna add load, you'd have to work with someone who understands training. But the movement bucket is your preparation bucket. That's going to be the cornerstone of your movement pyramid and training pyramid, because it's going to effectively assess your range of motion and muscle tissue quality. And once that's assessed and known, you're going to be able to adapt to your current program based on your current needs. So for example, if you had a bad shoulder, or if you had a hip flexor issue or a tight hamstring, you may require more flexibility, and you may have to skip parts of the strength and power depending on how severe the injury or tightness is. So you don't want to get injured in your training, so that's why it's important to go through movement exercises and assess your range of motion and flexibility, and go through preparation movement drills like skipping and activation drills like glute bridges or sunbird or bird dogs, you might call them, and your hands and knees reaching opposite, leg lowers, and stretching, static and isolated isometric stretching. So this would be the 4 bucket approaches. Things you could add in the movement bucket could be breathing. So you can talk about breathing and how breathing relates to movement. You can talk about breathing throughout the lesson. And you could also add in self-myofascial release, massage therapy, but that might not be needed at the secondary PE level. So tissues in high school students should be pretty soft and pliable as it is. So the movement bucket is really aimed for physical literacy, so they understand how the body moves and how to maintain that range of motion throughout adulthood, because they typically will start losing it after high school. But some individuals in high school have poor posture and may need to correct those postures through flexibility or mobility or core activation exercises to improve head position and spinal position, so we're not slouched over all the time. Or if we have an arch in our lower back, we might want to fix something like that. So whether it's scoliosis, something that we can't do anything about, we can still move around and try to get as much range of motion as we can without any pain. So this would be the 4 bucket approach for PE. All right, thanks.